Melody Clark wiped down the counter of the Stellar Diner with practiced efficiency. The morning rush was over, leaving only a few customers scattered among the booths. Through the large windows, spaceships of various sizes took off and landed at the busy New Houston spaceport. 50 years after Earth joined the Galactic Alliance, the sight of alien vessels no longer surprised anyone. Melody hummed quietly to herself as she worked. At 28, she had been serving at the diner for 6 years. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes focused on the task at hand. Most customers saw only a capable waitress who never mixed up orders and always remembered their preferences. "Order up for table 5, called Hank the cook. His large frame hunched over the grill as he flipped pancakes with expert precision. Melody collected the plates, balancing them along her arm with a skill that came from years of practice. She approached table 5, where a pair of Novalians sat. The aliens had blue-tinted skin and forearms each. They were regulars who visited Earth for trading purposes. "Here you go," Melody said with a warm smile. "Protein pancakes with syrup on the side for you, Granick, and nutrient stew with extra minerals for LZ. "Thank you, Melody Human," Granick said, blinking his 3 eyes in appreciation. "Your memory serves you well, as always." "Just doing my job," Melody replied. "Will you be at the music hall tonight?" Elsie asked. "I hear there is a performance by the Centaurian String Ensemble." Melody's smile faltered slightly. "No, I have to work the evening shift." The truth was more complicated. Melody avoided concerts and music halls. The memories were too painful. "A shame," Granick said. "Music transcends species boundaries. It is one of the few universal languages." Melody nodded politely and moved to the next table. Her regular customers often brought up music with her, not knowing how deeply the subject affected her. Frank Powell, the owner of the Stellar Diner, watched from behind the counter. A man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair, Frank had known Melody long enough to notice her discomfort. He was one of the few people who knew her secret. As the lunch crowd thinned out, Frank approached Melody. "Everything okay?" "Fine," she said. "Just the usual talk about concerts and performances." Frank nodded sympathetically. 6 years is a long time to run from your gift, Melody." Melody tensed. "I'm not running. I just chose a different path." "Path that makes you happy?" Before she could answer, the door chimed. Melody was grateful for the interruption until she saw who entered. A group of 5 aliens glided into the diner, their movements smooth and elegant. Each stood about 7 feet tall with slender bodies covered in scales that shifted color with their emotions. Currently, the scales displayed various shades of purple, indicating curiosity mixed with skepticism. "Vexorians," Frank whispered, his eyes widening. "We've never had them here before." Everyone in the galaxy knew about Vexorians. They were among the founding members of the Galactic Alliance and were famous for their musical abilities. Their hearing was so advanced they could detect sounds beyond human range, and their compositions were considered masterpieces throughout known space. They were also known for their low opinion of humans. "I'll handle this," Melody said. She straightened her uniform and approached the group. "Welcome to the Stellar Diner." She greeted them with a respectful nod, not too deep, which would seem servile, but enough to acknowledge their status. The tallest Vexorian's scales shifted to a deeper purple. "This establishment was recommended to us as an authentic human eating place." The translator device at his throat made his words sound metallic but clear. "That's correct, Ambassador," Melody said, recognizing the insignia on his clothing. "I'm Melody, and I'll be serving you today." The Vexorian tilted his head. "You recognize my rank. Interesting. We get all kinds of visitors here. Please follow me to a table." Melody led them to the largest booth, appropriate for their height. She handed them special tablets that displayed the menu in Vexorian script. "Our chef can adjust spice levels and ingredients to suit Vexorian preferences. Your metabolic needs are already programmed into our system." The Vexorians exchanged looks, their scales shifting to blue-green. Surprise. "You are prepared for Vexorian customers?" asked the ambassador. "We try to be prepared for everyone, Melody said. The diner's policy is to make all species feel welcome. The ambassador nodded slightly. I am Ambassador Zirith. These are my cultural advisors. We are on Earth for the preliminary meetings. About the interstellar cultural exchange. Melody felt her heart skip a beat. The interstellar cultural exchange was a major event held every 10 years, where species from across the Galactic Alliance showcased their artistic achievements. Earth had only participated once before with limited success. It's an honor to serve you, Melody said, maintaining her professional demeanor. What can I get for you today? After taking their orders, complex requests that would challenge Hank's skills, Melody returned to the kitchen. Frank followed her. Do you know who that is? Frank whispered excitedly. Ambassador Zirith heads the Cultural Exchange Committee. This could be great publicity for the diner. Let's just serve them well and not make a fuss, Melody said. As Melody delivered their food, she overheard the Vexorians discussing the upcoming exchange. Earth's participation will be minimal, of course, one advisor was saying. Their musical understanding is rudimentary at best. Indeed, said another. They still use primitive acoustic instruments that produce imprecise sounds. Their compositions lack mathematical elegance, added a third. All emotion with no structure. Ambassador, Zirith nodded. Still, protocol demands we include them. We will assign them a small display in the outer hall. Melody's hands tightened on her serving tray. She had heard such dismissive comments before, but they still stung. Not for her own sake, she had left that world behind, but for the many talented human musicians she knew. As the Vexorians ate, they continued their conversation, seemingly unaware or uncaring that Melody could hear them. They spoke of human. Art is childish, human music is simplistic noise. When it came time to pay, Ambassador Zirith approached the counter where Frank stood. The food was acceptable, he said. High praise from a Vexorian. Your establishment understands Vexorian needs better than most human businesses. Thank you, Frank said proudly. We believe in the spirit of the Galactic Alliance, celebrating our differences while finding common ground. A noble sentiment, Zirith said. Though finding common ground in the arts has proven difficult, humans simply haven't developed the necessary sophistication. Frank's smile faltered. With respect, Ambassador, humans have a rich musical tradition, thousands of years old. Yes, Zirith said, and Vexorians have one that spans 50,000 years. The difference is evident in the results. Melody watched from nearby, seeing Frank's face redden. She knew he loved human music and attended concerts regularly. Perhaps someday you'll be surprised by what humans can do, Frank said. Ambassador, Zirith's scales rippled with amusement. I welcome surprise, human Frank. It occurs so rarely. With that, the Vexorians glided out of the diner, leaving behind a hefty payment and an atmosphere of tension. Snobbish lizards, Hank muttered from the kitchen doorway. They're just different, Melody said. Their hearing is so advanced that most human music probably does sound simplistic to them. Frank looked at her thoughtfully. You know, Melody, you could show them a thing or two. Melody shook her head firmly. No, that part of my life is over. She returned to wiping down tables, but her mind drifted to the digital piano sitting unused in her apartment. She hadn't touched it in days. Sometimes she went weeks without playing. But tonight, she knew, she would need the comfort of the keys beneath her fingers. Some wounds never fully healed. Melody entered her small apartment after her shift ended. The space was neat and sparsely decorated. A small kitchen connected to a living area with a worn couch and a bookshelf filled with music books. In the corner sat her most prized possession, a digital piano. Unlike the grand pianos she once played, this one was modest, but its weighted keys felt right under her fingers. She dropped her bag and sank onto the bench before the piano. The encounter with the Vexorians had stirred something inside her. Their dismissive comments about human music echoed the criticisms she had faced years ago. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then with a deep breath she began to play. The music of Chopin filled her apartment. Her hands moved with precision and emotion, conveying feelings she could never express in words. For 20 minutes, She lost herself in the music, forgetting the diner, the Vexorians, and the painful memories. A knock on her door startled her. Her fingers slipped, creating a harsh discord. Melody quickly turned off the piano and went to the door. Her neighbor, Daniel Wright, stood there. He was a music teacher at the local school, a man in his early 30s with kind eyes and an easy smile. "Sorry to bother you," he said. "I heard you playing. It was beautiful." Melody shifted uncomfortably. "Thanks. I didn't mean to disturb you." "Disturb? Not at all." Daniel's eyes lit up. "That was Chopin's Ballade No. 1, wasn't it? Your technique is amazing." Melody nodded reluctantly. "I was just messing around." "That wasn't messing around. That was professional level playing." Daniel studied her face. "Have we met before? Outside of being neighbors, I mean." "I don't think so," Melody said quickly. "Anyway, I should get some rest. Early shift tomorrow." "Right, of course. Sorry again for interrupting." Daniel started to turn away, then paused. "You know, the school has a recital coming up. We're looking for performers to inspire the students." "I'm not a performer," Melody said firmly. "Just a waitress who plays sometimes." Daniel looked like he wanted to say more, but nodded respectfully. "Well, the offer stands. Good night, Melody." After he left, Melody leaned against the door and closed her eyes. She had been careless. Usually she played only when the building was nearly empty or used headphones. Now someone else knew about her talent. The next morning at the diner, Melody was clearing a table when Frank approached with an excited expression. "You won't believe what just happened," he said. "Ambassador Zirith called. The Vexorians are coming. Back next week with the full cultural committee." Melody frowned. "Why? They didn't seem impressed with Earth food. Actually, they liked it, but that's not why they're coming." Frank lowered his voice. "They want to discuss Earth's participation in the cultural exchange." "That's good, isn't it? Maybe they'll give Earth a better position than the small display." "In the outer hall, they mentioned." Frank looked slightly guilty. "Well, there's been a development. After they left yesterday, I contacted some people I know in the Earth Cultural Ministry. I told them about the Vexorians' visit and their dismissive attitude." "Frank?" Melody said warily. "What did you do?" "Nothing much. I just suggested that the ministry send a representative to meet the Vexorians here, someone who could discuss Earth's artistic contributions." Frank paused. "But then there was a misunderstanding with the translation system." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "The Vexorians somehow got the impression that we have a pianist here, someone who could demonstrate human music." Melody felt the blood drain from her face. "No." I tried to clarify, but then Ambassador Zirith issued a challenge. He said if a human from our establishment can perform music that moves even one member of their delegation, they will recommend Earth for a prominent position in the upcoming cultural showcase. And if not, they'll use their influence to minimize Earth's participation even further. Melody shook her head. "You need to call them back and explain the mistake." "I can't," Frank said. "It's a matter of interspecies diplomacy now. The ministry is sending someone to discuss it, but the Vexorians are expecting a musical demonstration." He looked at her pleadingly. "Melody, I heard you play years ago at the Terran Conservatory. You were brilliant." "That was before I failed. Spectacularly in front of critics from 3 planets," Melody said bitterly. "I froze, Frank. I couldn't play a single note. Do you know what they called me? The proof that humans aren't ready for galactic musical integration." "That was one bad day," Frank said. "One critic who had his own agenda. It was broadcast across the Alliance. My career was over before it began." Frank placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "This isn't about your career. It's about Earth's place in the Alliance. The cultural exchange influences trade agreements, educational exchanges, everything." Melody struggled with her emotions. "I can't do it, Frank. I haven't performed in public for 6 years. Just think about it, please. For all the human artists who deserve a chance." Before she could answer, the door chimed. A woman in a formal suit entered, her posture rigid and professional. "That's Linda Carter from the Cultural Ministry," Frank whispered. "I should talk to her." As Frank greeted the government representative, Melody retreated to the kitchen. Her hands trembled slightly as she poured coffee. The thought of performing in front of Vexorians made her stomach clench with anxiety. Hank noticed her distress. "You okay?" "Frank wants me to play piano for the Vexorians next week," she said. Hank's eyebrows shot up. "You play piano? Since when?" "Since I was 4. I trained at the Terran Conservatory." "Huh." Hank flipped a burger on the grill. "Never would have guessed. Why'd you stop?" "I wasn't good enough." Hank snorted. "Says who? Critics, teachers, a human-alien musical integration committee. And you believed them?" Hank shook his head. "Look, I don't know much about fancy music, but I know when someone's running from something good." Melody was saved from responding when Frank entered the kitchen with Linda Carter. "Melody, this is..." "Linda from the ministry. Linda, this is Melody Clark." The woman's eyes widened with recognition. "Melody Clark? From the Terran Conservatory?" Melody nodded reluctantly. "I saw recordings of your early performances," Linda said. "Before the incident, you were exceptional." "That was a long time ago," Melody said. "Perhaps. But talent like yours doesn't disappear." Linda placed a tablet on the counter. "This contains information about the Vexorian delegation and what's at stake for Earth. The cultural exchange affects everything from university admissions for human students to artistic grants." Melody glanced at the tablet but didn't pick it up. "We understand this is asking a lot," Linda continued. "But the opportunity is significant. Ambassador Zirith rarely issues direct challenges. He must have heard something about your abilities." "He hasn't heard anything," Melody said. "It was a misunderstanding. Nevertheless, the challenge exists, and Earth needs this." Linda handed Melody a card. "Think about it. If you agree, we'll provide whatever support you need." After Linda left, Melody retreated to a quiet corner of the diner. She picked up the tablet and began reading about the cultural exchange. What she found disturbed her. Earth's artistic programs were indeed being marginalized. Human musicians struggled to gain recognition in the Alliance, often being relegated to novelty acts rather than serious artists. Frank approached cautiously. "I'm sorry for putting you in this position. I'll find another solution." Melody looked up at him. "How long do I have to decide?" 2 days. The delegation returns next week." Melody nodded slowly. "I need to think." That night she sat at her piano but didn't play. Instead, she stared at her reflection in the polished surface. The scared girl who had frozen on stage 6 years ago stared back. But behind that fear, she saw something else. The love of music that had defined her life before failure changed everything. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play softly, wondering if she had the courage to face her greatest fear. The next morning, a knock on Melody's door woke her earlier than her alarm. She opened it to find Daniel Wright standing there with 2 cups of coffee. "Sorry for the early visit," he said, offering her one of the cups. "I couldn't stop thinking about your playing." Melody accepted the coffee reluctantly. "It's really not a big deal." "It is to me. I teach music to kids who have never heard a real pianist perform." Daniel hesitated. "May I come in? Just for a minute." Against her better judgment, Melody let him enter. Daniel immediately noticed the piano and walked over to it. "This is a good instrument," he said, running his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "But you've played much better ones, haven't you?" Melody sipped her coffee. "How did you know?" "The way you play. That kind of technique comes from years of serious training." Daniel turned to face her. "I looked you up last night. Melody Clark, child prodigy, youngest student ever accepted to the Terran Conservatory." Melody tensed. "If you know who I am, then you know what happened." "I know about the galactic debut incident. Everyone in the music world does." Daniel's voice was gentle. "But one bad performance doesn't erase your talent." "It wasn't just bad. It was humiliating." Melody set down her coffee. "Conductor Walsh used my failure as proof that humans weren't ready for the galactic music scene. My name became a joke." "Walsh is known for his harsh judgments," Daniel said. "But he's just one person. A very influential person who's now the head of the Interspecies Musical Academy. Melody glanced at the clock. I need to get ready for work. Daniel nodded. Of course, but before I go, Frank called me yesterday. Melody froze. What? Why? He knows I teach music. He told me about the Vexorian challenge and asked if I could help you prepare. Daniel saw her expression and quickly added, I told him I'd need to speak with you first. There's nothing to discuss. I'm not performing. Are you sure? Frank seemed to think Earth's cultural standing depends on it. That's not fair, Melody said, her voice rising. I'm a waitress now, not Earth's musical ambassador. Daniel looked at her piano. Maybe you're both. Look, the diner is closed today, right? Meet me at the new Houston Community Center at noon just to talk. Why would I do that? Because despite everything, you still play. That piano isn't dusty. Daniel moved toward the door. Just think about it, no pressure. After he left, Melody got ready for her day off with mixed emotions. She had planned to clean her apartment and maybe visit the market. Instead, she found herself looking up information about Vexorian music. The more she read, the more intimidated she felt. Vexorians could hear frequencies humans couldn't detect. Their music was mathematically complex, with patterns that human ears might miss entirely. How could she possibly impress them? At 11:45, against her better judgment, Melody found herself walking toward the community center. When she arrived, she heard piano music coming from inside. She followed the sound to a large room where Daniel sat at an old upright piano, playing a simple teaching piece. He looked up and smiled. You came. Just to talk, Melody reminded him. Daniel stood up from the piano bench. This is where I teach. My students. Nothing fancy, but the acoustics are good. Melody glanced around the room. It was nothing like the grand concert hall she had once dreamed of playing in. Somehow that made it less intimidating. Frank told me about the Vexorian challenge, Daniel said. It's a big deal. Too big. I haven't performed in public for 6 years. Then start small. Play something now. Just for me. Melody shook her head. I can't. Yes, you can. You play at home, don't you? That's different. The notes are the same. Daniel gestured to the piano. This instrument doesn't care about your past. Neither do I. Melody hesitated, then slowly sat at the piano. She placed her hands on the keys and began to play a simple piece she had learned as a child. The notes came easily, muscle memory taking over. When she finished, she felt calmer. Beautiful, Daniel said. Now try something more challenging. Melody began to play Bach. As the complex patterns of notes filled the room, she forgot about Daniel watching. Her fingers danced across the keys, with precision and feeling. When she finished, she was breathing hard as if she had run a race. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Vexorians appreciate mathematical patterns in music. Bach might be a good choice for them. You think I should do it? Face the Vexorians? I think music is meant to be shared, and you have a gift that shouldn't be hidden. Melody stood up abruptly. Even if I wanted to do this, which I don't, 1 week isn't enough time to prepare for a performance that could determine Earth's cultural standing. Then let's not think of it as a performance, Daniel suggested. Think of it as sharing something you love. The Vexorians won't see it that way. They'll be judging every note. Daniel considered this. What if you knew more about how they hear music, what they respond to? How would I learn that? Vexorian musical theory isn't taught to humans, not officially, but I have a former student who works at the Galactic Embassy. Daniel pulled out his phone. Let me make a call. 2 hours later, Melody and Daniel sat in a small office at the embassy. Across from them was a young woman named Alicia Reeves, who worked as a cultural liaison. I shouldn't be sharing this, Alicia said, sliding a data tablet across the desk. But Daniel was the best teacher I ever had, so I'm making an exception. The tablet contained information about Vexorian hearing and musical preferences. Melody scrolled through it with growing interest. They perceive harmonics differently than we do, she murmured. and they can hear patterns across octaves that would sound disconnected to human ears. Exactly, Alicia said. When they dismiss human music as simplistic, it's because they're literally hearing different elements than we are. Could human music be adapted to appeal to them? Daniel asked. Theoretically. But it would require understanding both Vexorian, perception, and human composition. Alicia looked at Melody curiously. Are you a musician? She's a pianist, Daniel said before Melody could deny it. And a brilliant one. Alicia's eyes widened. Really? The ambassador issued a challenge about a human pianist, is that you? It might be, Melody admitted reluctantly. Then you need to know that the stakes are higher than you realize. The Vexorians don't just influence the cultural exchange. They're considering creating a new mixed-species orchestra with positions open to all Alliance members. Why would they do that? Melody asked. They think human music is primitive. Politics. Some younger Vexorians want more integration with other species. The traditionalists are resisting. Alicia leaned forward. Ambassador Zirith is testing the waters with this challenge. If a human can impress them, it supports the progressives' position. Melody felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. So it's not just about Earth's place in the exchange? It's about human musicians having opportunities throughout the Alliance for years to come. As they left the embassy, Melody was quiet. Daniel waited patiently for her to speak. I'll need to practice, she finally said. A lot. Does that mean you'll do it? Melody took a deep breath. It means I'll try. But I need help understanding how to adapt human music for Vexorian hearing. Daniel smiled. Then let's get to work. For the first time in 6 years, Melody felt a spark of the passion that had once defined her life. The fear was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Determination. The next 5 days passed in a blur of intense practice. Melody took time off from the diner, explaining to Frank that she needed to prepare. He was more than supportive, giving her the week with pay and offering the closed diner as a practice space during off hours. The old upright piano was moved from the community center to the diner. It wasn't a grand concert piano, but it had a warm, rich tone that suited Melody's playing style. Each morning she arrived early to practice before Daniel joined her after his teaching duties. Try the Bach again, Daniel said on the 4th day, but emphasize the mathematical patterns more. Remember what we learned about Vexorian hearing. Melody nodded and began to play. She had studied the information from the embassy carefully, learning how Vexorians perceived sound. Their advanced hearing could detect patterns across multiple octaves simultaneously, something humans could understand in theory, but not truly hear. She had chosen 3 pieces for the performance. A Bach fugue, modified to emphasize the mathematical structures, a Chopin nocturne selected for its emotional depth, and a piece of her own composition that combined human expression with patterns designed to appeal to Vexorian sensibilities. As she played the Bach, Daniel nodded approvingly. Much better. The underlying patterns are clearer now. But will it be enough? Melody asked, stopping mid-phrase. Vexorians have been playing mathematically complex music for thousands of years. They have, Daniel agreed, but they've never heard human mathematics and human emotion combined the way you're doing it. The bell above the diner door chimed. They both turned to see Frank enter with Linda Carter from the Cultural Ministry. Sorry to interrupt, Frank said. Linda has some updates about tomorrow. Linda looked more tense than during her previous visit. The Vexorian delegation has expanded. Ambassador Zirith is bringing 7 cultural advisors instead of 4, and 2 representatives from the Interspecies Musical Academy. Melody felt her stomach tighten. Who from the academy? Linda hesitated. Conductor Walsh is one of them. The room went silent. Melody's hands fell from the keys to her lap. I can't do this, she whispered. Not with him there. Daniel looked confused. Who is Conductor Walsh? The human conductor who criticized my debut performance, Melody explained, her voice hollow. He said I proved humans weren't ready for galactic musical integration. He's also now the human liaison to the Vexorian Musical Council. Linda added. When he heard about the challenge, he insisted on attending. Frank put a hand on Melody's shoulder. You don't have to go through with this if you don't want to. Melody stared at the piano keys. 6 years ago, she had let one man's criticism destroy her confidence and end her career. Now he would be sitting in judgment again. What happens if I back out? She asked Linda. Earth's position in the cultural exchange remains minimal. The progressive faction among the Vexorians loses support, and human musicians continue to be overlooked for galactic opportunities. Daniel sat beside Melody on the piano bench. You're not the same person you were 6 years ago. You've grown. Your music has grown. Walsh will try to undermine me again. Probably, Daniel agreed. But this time you're not playing for him. You're playing for the Vexorians, for Earth, and most importantly for yourself. Melody took a deep breath. I need some air. She walked out of the diner into the busy spaceport area. Ships of various sizes continued their routine of takeoffs and landings. Aliens and humans moved about their business. None of them knew or cared about her internal struggle. Melody found a bench with a view of the spaceport and sat down. The vast expanse of ships and stars beyond reminded her how small her problems were in the grand scheme of things. And yet, tomorrow's performance could affect Earth's cultural standing for years. Melody human. The voice startled her. She turned to see Granick, the Novalian regular from the diner, standing nearby. Granick, hello? May I join you? When Melody nodded, he sat beside her, his 4 arms folded neatly. Frank Powell told me about tomorrow's challenge. You seem troubled. I am, Melody admitted. I haven't performed publicly in a long time, and someone who once criticized me harshly will be there. Granick's 3 eyes blinked thoughtfully. On my world, we have a saying. The song remains true even when listeners disagree about its beauty. What does that mean? It means that the value of your music exists independently of others' judgment of it. Granick's blue skin shimmered in the afternoon light. The Vexorians have excellent hearing but no monopoly on musical truth. Melody considered his words. I'm afraid of failing again. That is understandable. But is the fear worth the cost of never sharing your gift? Granick stood. I will be there tomorrow if you permit it. Many of your regular customers wish to attend. After Granick left, Melody remained on the bench, thinking. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the spaceport. Finally, she returned to the diner where Daniel was still waiting. I've been working on your composition, he said without preamble. I think we can strengthen the Vexorian appeal while keeping the human emotional core. Melody sat beside him, at the piano. Show me. They worked late into the night, refining and practicing. By the time they finished, Melody's fingers were sore, but her mind was clear. She would play tomorrow, regardless of who was in the audience. Morning arrived too quickly. The diner had been transformed. Tables were pushed to the sides to create a performance space in the center. The old upright piano had been tuned one final time. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the piano. Melody arrived early, wearing a simple black dress rather than her waitress uniform. Daniel met her at the door. How do you feel? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. But ready. Linda Carter arrived next, bringing news. The delegation is on their way. Ambassador Zirith seems genuinely interested in this challenge. Frank bustled about, arranging last-minute details. Remember, this is still just my diner, not a fancy concert hall. Be yourself. People began to arrive. Regular customers from the diner, humans and aliens alike, filled the back rows. In the front row, 7 empty seats awaited the Vexorian delegation. At precisely 10:00, the door opened. Ambassador Zirith entered, followed by 6 other Vexorians, their scales shifting between shades of purple and blue. Behind them came 2 humans. One was a woman Melody didn't recognize. The other was Conductor Walsh. He looked exactly as Melody remembered. Tall, stern, with silver hair and cold eyes. He spotted her immediately, and a flicker of recognition crossed his face. Ambassador Zirith approached Melody. You are the pianist? I was not informed who would be performing. Yes, Ambassador, I'm Melody Clark. Walsh stepped forward. Ambassador, I know this performer. She is not of the caliber you were expecting. The ambassador's scales shifted to a deeper purple. I will make my own assessment, Conductor Walsh. That is the purpose of today's gathering. The Vexorians took their seats. Walsh sat beside them, his expression dismissive. The other human, a woman with kind eyes, gave Melody an encouraging nod. Frank addressed the gathering. Thank you all for coming. As you know, Ambassador Zyrith issued a challenge. If a human pianist from our establishment can move even one member of the Vexorian delegation with her music, Earth will receive greater recognition in the upcoming cultural exchange. He turned to Melody. Whenever you're ready. Melody approached the piano, her heart pounding. The room fell silent as she sat down. She looked at the keys, then at the audience, and finally at Daniel, who smiled reassuringly. This was it. The moment of truth. 6 years of hiding were about to end, for better or worse. Melody placed her hands on the keys and began to play. Melody's fingers touched the keys, and the first notes of Bach filled the diner. She had chosen to begin with the fugue, showcasing the mathematical precision that Vexorians valued. As she played, she focused on bringing out the patterns she had studied, making the underlying structures clear even to alien ears. The Vexorians sat motionless, their scales shifting subtly between shades of blue and purple. Ambassador Zyrith's head tilted slightly, the only indication he was listening intently. Conductor Walsh watched with narrowed eyes, his arms crossed over his chest. For the first minute, Melody was acutely aware of her audience. Then, as the music grew more complex, she began to lose herself in the familiar patterns. Her fingers moved with confidence born from thousands of hours of practice. The diner, the audience, even her past failure faded away. There was only the music. As the Bach piece ended, Melody paused briefly. She glanced at Daniel, who gave her an encouraging nod. Then she began the Chopin Nocturne. Where Bach was mathematical, Chopin was emotional. Melody poured her feelings into the piece. Her fears, her hopes, the joy she had rediscovered in music over the past week. The nocturne swelled and faded, intimate and powerful by turns. One of the younger Vexorians leaned forward, their scales shifting to a shade of green Melody hadn't seen before. Ambassador Zyrith glanced at his colleague with interest. Conductor, Walsh's expression remained cold, but the human woman beside him was smiling slightly, her eyes closed as she listened. When the Chopin ended, the diner remained silent. Melody took a deep breath and began her final piece, the composition she and Daniel had worked on together. It started simply, with a melody that might have come from any human composer. But as it developed, it incorporated patterns specifically designed for Vexorian hearing, creating harmonies that bridged the gap between human and alien musical traditions. This was the most challenging piece, requiring Melody to think in ways that went beyond her traditional training. There were moments when her fingers nearly faltered, but she pushed through, remembering what was at stake. As the composition reached its climax, Melody noticed something extraordinary. The scales of all 7 Vexorians had shifted to a brilliant teal color. Their head frills, usually lying flat, were fully extended, a sign of intense engagement rarely seen in the presence of non-Vexorians. Even more surprising, Ambassador Zyrith's long fingers were moving slightly, as if unconsciously following the patterns in her music. Conductor Walsh noticed too, his expression changing from dismissal to disbelief. Melody brought the piece to its conclusion, a final chord that blended human emotion with Vexorian mathematical precision. As the sound faded, she remained still, her hands hovering above the keys. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then, one of the younger Vexorians rose to their feet, scales still glowing teal. This was unexpected, they said, their translator making the words sound flat compared to the richness of Melody's music. I perceive both mathematical structure and something more. Ambassador Zyrith also stood. The third composition was particularly noteworthy. It incorporated elements of Vexorian harmonic theory while maintaining a distinctly human quality. Ambassador, Walsh interrupted. While technically proficient, this performance hardly justifies changing Earth's position in the cultural exchange. On the contrary, the ambassador replied, it provides evidence that humans are more musically advanced than previously assessed. The performer has clearly studied Vexorian hearing and adapted her playing accordingly. The human woman who had come with Walsh stepped forward. If I may, Ambassador, I'm Dr. Elena Rivera from the Interspecies Musical Academy. What we've witnessed today is precisely the kind of cross-species musical understanding our institution hopes to foster. Walsh's face reddened. This is one performance by one pianist. It doesn't represent Earth's musical capabilities as a whole. Perhaps not, Ambassador Zeereth conceded, but it demonstrates potential we had not fully recognized. He turned to Melody. Human Melody Clark, your music has fulfilled the terms of our challenge. It has moved not just one, but all members of our delegation. Melody could hardly believe what she was hearing. Thank you, Ambassador. The Earth Cultural Ministry will be informed of our recommendation for an expanded presence at the exchange, Zeereth continued. Additionally, we wish to extend an invitation. An invitation? Melody echoed. The Vexorian Musical Council is forming an interspecies orchestra for the exchange opening ceremony. We would like you to represent Earth as a pianist. The room erupted in applause. Frank was beaming with pride. Linda Carter looked stunned but delighted. Daniel's eyes were shining with unshed tears. Conductor Walsh stood rigidly, his authority clearly undermined. Ambassador, this decision is premature. There are protocols. The protocols have been observed, Dr. Rivera interrupted smoothly. The challenge was issued and met. As for the orchestra invitation, that falls under Vexorian cultural jurisdiction, not Academy oversight. Walsh turned to Melody, his expression cold. You may have impressed them today, but sustaining a career requires more than one lucky performance. Before Melody could respond, one of the older Vexorians spoke. For beings who cannot hear as we, do humans have an extraordinary capacity to create patterns that transcend mere sound. It is humbling. This admission from a Vexorian, a species known for their sense of musical superiority, left Walsh speechless. As the gathering began to disperse, aliens and humans alike approached Melody to offer congratulations. Granick, the Novalian, bowed slightly. The song was true. The listeners simply needed to hear it properly. Daniel was the last to approach her. How do you feel? Melody considered the question. 6 years of hiding her talent had ended in a single performance. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. Like I've been holding my breath for years and can finally breathe again. What will you do about the orchestra invitation? He asked. I don't know, she admitted. I've been a waitress. For so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be a musician. You never stopped being a musician, Daniel said. You just stopped performing. Ambassador Zeereth approached them. Human Melody Clark, your performance has sparked considerable discussion. Among my delegation, the younger members in particular are interested in further musical exchange. I'm honored, Ambassador. Your third composition, was it created specifically for this performance? Melody nodded. Yes, I studied what I could about Vexorian hearing and tried to compose something that would bridge our different perceptions of music. Remarkable. Most humans do not make such efforts to understand non-human perspectives. The ambassador's scales shifted to a softer blue. Perhaps music can succeed where diplomacy sometimes fails. After the ambassador moved away, Frank joined Melody and Daniel. I knew you could do it, he said proudly, though I never expected Vexorian head frills to stand up like that. What does it mean? It's their involuntary response to significant stimuli, Daniel explained. Like humans getting goosebumps during a powerful musical performance. So they were moved by Melody's playing, Frank said with satisfaction. I'd like to see Walsh try to dismiss that. Dr. Rivera approached. Ms. Clark, your performance was extraordinary. The Academy would be very interested in studying your compositional approach. I had help, Melody said, gesturing to Daniel. We worked together to understand how Vexorian hearing differs from human perception. Then perhaps both of you would consider sharing your insights, Dr. Rivera suggested. There's much to learn about cross-species musical communication. As people continued to talk around her, Melody found herself looking at the piano. For years, it had been a source of pain and fear. Now it felt like an old friend welcoming her back. She didn't know if she would join the interspecies orchestra or continue working at the diner. Perhaps she could do both. What mattered was that music was part of her life again, not hidden away but shared with others, human and alien alike. The hidden pianist was hidden no more.